Dalton, one team that had kind of a bounce back year that nobody really saw coming was the Florida Gators, who won 8-5 last year, despite Billy Napier being on the hot seat, maybe the hottest seat in the country, and despite having one of the most brutal schedules in the country. He had his best year yet with Florida with an 8-5 record and their first bowl game victory since 2019. Expectations are probably around the same for Florida going into next year, thanks to a potential superstar right there at quarterback in sophomore DJ Lagway and a great supporting cast around him too. If he can polish up his footwork, they should be able to score on anyone. The biggest question mark, which we'll get into in just a second, is whether a now experienced secondary can improve after really struggling last year. But Dalton, this offense has a ton of potential.
Yeah, absolutely. With DJ Lagway as its quarterback, I think this was the hope last year in his true freshman season was that, okay, could he be the ray of light, right? Could he get us out of quarterback purgatory? I know Graham Mertz did a good job for him, but this thing really sparked in the second half when Lagway became the starter. Now, was it due to Mertz's injury? Sure. But you're talking about a guy he almost led an upset over Tennessee. He upset LSU and Ole Miss late in the year, right? Beat Florida State, won their bowl game. They got hot down the stretch, and it's because Lagway there's a reason he was the number one quarterback in coming out of high school last year. He's the ray of hope, and At least he's given them that ray of hope going into this season. Now, there are things on both sides of the ball, and even for Lagway himself, that have to improve, but you have him, you have Trey Wilson coming back healthy, J. Michael Sturdivant transferring in from UCLA, Aiden Mizell, a really good offensive line, a potentially explosive offense. But if it really lives up to the hype, and Lagway lives up to the hype, one of the most explosive offenses in the SEC. We got to see it more consistently, but the talent is all there, especially on the offensive side of the ball, for this Florida team to play with anybody, because they proved they could the second half of last year.
You got a quarterback with maybe more potential than anyone else in the country in DJ Lagway, a top 10 receiver in Trey Wilson, a great running back in sophomore Jaden Ball, and also one of the 5 best offensive lines, in my opinion, too, in the entire nation. So, yeah, if Lagway can take the next step in his development, they should be able to score and light up the scoreboard on everyone. Now, the question is, will the score be lit up on them, too? Because the secondary did struggle a lot last year. Florida had just a 63.4 coverage grade last year, 111th in the country. Now, they did bring back 6 of the 8 defensive backs who played at least 250 snaps for the Gators last year. So they'll be hoping that those players will take a big step forward. I do like some of the players they have in that secondary, like Jordan Castell, the safety. But like I said before, as a unit, they really did not perform well at all last year. And that's going to be the biggest question mark for Florida going into next year. But Dalton, tell me more about DJ Lagway again. A guy who probably has more physical talent than anyone else in college football at quarterback. But there's still some things to clean up with them.
Absolutely, and I think you see it right there. The number that jumps out at you is that 95.6 deep passer grade. That was the 3rd best in the country last season, and what you have is arm talent. The ball absolutely explodes out of his hand. As a true freshman, honestly, already has NFL caliber arm talent, and he can make any throw on the field. I think that's what you're getting at. He's got good size. He can get outside the pocket and improvise a bit. He's not a Josh Allen type of athlete necessarily as a runner, but he can break tackles and escape the pocket and make throws on the move. I think what you have is this big split between being able to hit the home runs and needing to be more accurate underneath. And I think that's really where it's going to be the key for him, for Lagway this season and his success is, can he just be more accurate underneath and just settle his feet down, right? I think if he used this offseason to settle his feet down and throw from a more consistent base, because a lot of times, you said it, he's throwing off one foot, he's throwing off of both feet, he's making jump throws that somehow go 50 yards and are still absolute ropes, but it hurts your underneath accuracy when you don't have a consistent base. So honestly, it's going to sound funny because I know you're going to talk about another guy, but I think the most important guy for Lagway and for this offense is a healthy Trey Wilson, because he can take those underneath routes and he can make all those plays after the catch, and all Lagway has to do is get him the football underneath. But that's what I'm looking for, footwork and accuracy. If he fixes those 2 things underneath, the sky is the absolute limit, because his arm talent is off the charts.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you mentioned before, he was one of the 5 highest graded quarterbacks on deep throws last year, and one of the 10 lowest graded, I believe, on all their throws and intermediate and short throws. So yeah, it was just really a guy who just takes a big shot down the field and is a great deep ball thrower, but got to clean up the accuracy underneath for Lagway as well. One guy who doesn't really need to clean up anything, because he's already the best center in the country and maybe the best interior offensive lineman in the country, is Jake Slaughter, our number 1 interior offensive lineman going into next year. Stellar redshirt junior year. In fact, if you asked me last year, I would have told you Jake Slaughter deserved the Remington Award as the best center in college football. He was the only Power 4 center who had 80-plus grades as both a pass blocker and as a run blocker. And even more impressive was the schedule he faced. I mentioned before, Florida had one of the most brutal schedules in the country. Maybe the most brutal schedule in terms of the talented defensive tackles Jake Slaughter had to face. He had to play Walter Nolan, Alfred Collins, Shamar Turner, Deion Walker, Omar Norman Lott, and Josh Farmer. All those players were selected in the first 4 rounds of the 2025 NFL Draft. 85.8 overall grade over the last 2 years. Only Jackson Powers Johnson has a higher grade among Power 4 centers. Moves very well at 6'4", 308 pounds. He dominates in his own blocking scheme. And Dalton, I think he is the star player for Florida right now and a top 15 player in the country.
Absolutely agree. Jake Slaughter, it just you flip on his tape and play to play, it feels like he never makes any mistakes. And you mentioned the level of competition. He's already done it once. I would expect the same this year with a year of experience under his belt. Look, really a very good Florida offensive line all the way across, all 5 guys, right? And I think what we have faith in this Florida team and a stable environment for DJ Lagway is the fact that they have a great O-line, they have a great D-line, right? And we'll get to that in a second. They just have to fill in around it. And they can be really good. It's almost frustrating to watch at times because even you saw on both sides in the trenches, especially when they played LSU, dominated the trenches on both sides of the ball. And LSU had a lot of really talented players on both sides. So I think that's what gives you hope against some of the better teams in the SEC. And Florida's got another tough schedule this year is they're really good on the offensive and defensive lines.
They had my number 4 offensive line in the country, and I believe my number 4 D-line in the country too, Dalton. And you're going to get into a guy right here who makes up that.
And that's led by Tyreek Sapp, who had the 10th best grade of any edge defender in college football last year. 88.7 run defense grade, 82 pass rush grade. He can do a little bit of everything. A former defensive tackle who they use as such. They reduce him inside, much like I talked about with Keldrick Falk in Auburn earlier. He can get over the tackle. He can play a wide 9. He can pretty much align wherever you need him to. He's an excellent run stopper first and foremost, and the pass rush is still coming along. He's 6'2", but he plays with good leverage. He's quick inside. He can give you a little bit of everything. So I think to have a versatile, strong player like Tyreek Sapp next to an awesome defensive tackle, really talented one, especially as a pass rusher, and Caleb Banks, you can see where Florida is building this team in the trenches and then behind it on offense around their quarterback. But I think especially for their defense, the hope is that this defensive line can dominate and then the secondary can get better behind it. It's kind of the same way. It reminds me a little bit of what we talked about with Miami last year, right? Where it's, you have this great D-line. I just need the back 7 to hold up enough. That's really the big question with Florida. But when you're starting your defensive line with Tyreek Sapp and then with Caleb Banks next to him, you got a lot of hope up front.
Absolutely. Yeah, 2 guys who maybe could be first-round picks in the NFL Draft. Tyreek Sapp had a 90.4 PFF grade last year, second best among returning Power 4 edge rushers. All right, Dalton. Florida, do we think they're going to have another 8+ win season? Right now, the win total set at 7.5 by FanDuel. I will say Florida has the 4th hardest schedule in the country. Another brutal schedule for the Gators. Once again, according to our power rankings, are they going to go over or under? And what do you think is ultimately the bottom line for Florida?
This is tough. That's another hard one because I see 5. I think I see 5 games here that I think they should win. You never know with the rivalry in the Florida State game and how much they need to get a lot better too. But I see 5 games here that I think they should win. Can they scratch out 3 others? Maybe Miami. We don't know what LSU is right now, especially on defense with all the transfers. I'll say I'll take the over. Not too far. I think 8 or 9 could be within range. But this is another really tough schedule. LSU, Miami, Texas, A&M, Georgia. I mean, there's some tough games here. They beat LSU and Ole Miss last year. So I'll take the over. I could see this getting in the 8-9 range, but a lot of it depends on, you've mentioned it before, DJ Lagway getting more consistent and the secondary just holding things together. If the secondary can't hold things together again, they're going to have a real problem with all the great offenses and quarterbacks they're playing. But I'll take the over. I could see 8 or 9 being the result here. Maybe a borderline playoff team.
All right, I'm actually going to take the under. It's the first one we disagree on today. I just look at the schedule, man. They're at LSU. They are at Miami. They host Texas, but still has a top 3 or so team in the country. At Texas A&M. You got Georgia too, and then you're at Ole Miss. You still play Tennessee. You still have Florida State. I think, again, I'm not saying it's a hard under. I think a 7-5 is probably what I would say for Florida right now.
That 7.5 feels right, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
It's like,
that's exactly what I would put it.
I want to say 8-4. You want to say 7-5.
Talent-wise, they're better than 7-5, but this schedule is just brutal.
Well, the schedule is brutal, but they do have things that they need to get better with. If they can't, if for the 3rd year in a row they can't cover, they're going to go under because I mean, look at this. They're playing Garrett Nussmeier, Carson Beck, Arch Manning. I know A&M's a running team, but they can still mix it up a little bit. Georgia always finds a way, and that's a rivalry, right?
Kiffin.
Lane Kiffin and Austin Simmons, which we'll get there, but I'm a believer in their offense. So I mean, if you can't cover, things get a lot more difficult. We've seen that at LSU. We've seen it at Miami. It's a problem if your secondary's not right. If that gets right, and again, Lagway just takes a natural step, I think the over is right in front of them. That feels like the right number, though. That's 7.5. That's one of the tougher ones I think we have today.
It's all on Lagway and all on that secondary. If they both improve, Florida could be a dark horse playoff contender absolutely in 2025.